if you are struggling with imposter syndrome at work, at home, in your relationship, whatever, you don't need to do more. You do need to do less, and you need to do less better, meaning you need to find where the pain points are, and you need to figure out what alignment means to you. Welcome to Feelings and Other F Words. I'm Dr. Daryl Appleton, and this is a Vogue Top 10 mental health and wellness podcast, friends. We are doing the damn thing. Now, this week's F word is all about fraudulence. Now, hold on. I need to tangent for a second. I'm looking at myself in this display, and my hair is very fluffy. I started using, sidebar, we'll get to it. We'll get to it in a second. I started using bar shampoo and conditioner, like literally shampoo and conditioner in a bar. I think it's called from a brand Kitsch. I'm not sure. They're not paying me to say this, I promise. But I've been liking it. And my hair, first time looking at myself all day, apparently, my hair's not bad. I'm into it. Anyway, back to fraudulence here. Maybe I have some things to work out. This week's F word is all about fraudulence. And really and truly, I want us to unpack imposter syndrome, because it is not a matter of if you are going to feel imposter syndrome, statistically, according to science. It is a matter of when, unless you're Martha Stewart, who has never heard of it nor felt it. And I love that for everyone, and me and her. But for a lot of us, that is not the case, and it won't be the case. Sidebar, and I need to say this because imposter syndrome is the number one thing that I get asked to keynote, workshop, and consult on. Imposter syndrome is the number one thing where organizations tend to bring me in. And guess what? It's a lot of women reaching out in organizations, which aligns perfectly with the data. We'll talk about that in a second. But I need to leave you or start you with this, because I start it with any conversation I have about imposter syndrome, because I do not want to be misconstrued. Confidence, we were talking about confidence and self-assurance, really, when we talk about imposter syndrome, or to combat it. But confidence does not equal competence. You still need to be good at the thing that you are trying to feel good about, right? I cannot sit here and condone, I can make you feel as confident as you want, or I can help you get there, but that does not mean you'll be good at the thing that you're trying to do. So confidence does not equal competence. That being said, what is imposter syndrome then? Like, what is it actually? And here's what all the research and science has to say. Imposter syndrome started out as studied as imposter phenomenon. And this was studied in the 70s, actually. And that might be a shocker to some of you that we've been talking about this for this long and it's still so prevalent. But it started with Clancy and Imes, and they sat down with a very successful, very brilliant, high-powered woman, and they were interviewing her, and they were shocked at how she spoke about her success. They were shocked at the self-deprecating nature of her narrative, of how she just didn't feel like a success, and they started to study this. And they studied it specifically in women, and they found that 70% of women have felt or will feel imposter syndrome at some point in their lives. And this was in the 70s, right? Now, when I say, I'm going to talk a lot about work, but this is not work only, right? This is not just like traditional work, office, whatever. This is also PTA. You might feel imposter syndrome on the playground, as a new parent, as a new partner, starting in a new friend group, right? This is not just work. We're going to be talking a lot about it, but I want you to know that this is not just showing up at a place you get a paycheck. Now, in the 80s, there was another group of researchers, Harvey and Katz, who studied imposter syndrome. And they were like, wait, what about the men? And they found that men also have felt or will feel imposter syndrome as well. And in 2011, we found that there was about 70% or more of people who will/are feeling this. And I think that number is fascinating, because again, that is not a matter of if you're going to feel it on a lot of levels. It is a matter of when, and in my mind, how much and to what impact. In 2013, there was a researcher, Coakley, who looked at minorities and first-generation professionals and found that the rates of imposter syndrome were closer to 80 or 90%. So there's that layer. And then just recently, last year in 2024, Korn Ferry did a study and they found that 1 in 2 executives, senior executives, feel imposter syndrome. And that's around 64%. So a little bit more than 1 in 2. So what does this mean? It means it's gender agnostic. It means that it's position agnostic. It is workplace agnostic or not, life agnostic. Like, we are seeing that this is actually one of the main common things that humans can actually relate to each other on, which I think is a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful, terrible thing. Now, some of the other things to keep in mind, study-wise, nerd-wise, let me nerd out for just a little bit longer, please. From the performance and psychology lens, high achievers are more vulnerable to this. And this is because imposter syndrome almost enters into this performance paradox of, I need to prove my worth. And then once I quote unquote prove it, it's not good enough. So I need to seek out and prove something else. And I'm always chasing, I'm always looking for the next thing. Like, this holiday needs to be better. I need to show up for my friends in this capacity. I need to prove to my boss, right? Like, I'm really a go-getter. And what it is it's self-protective coping. If I feel like a fraud first, I'm not going to be shocked, or I'll be better prepared when you, boss, friend, partner, whatever, feel that I am a fraud or challenge or critique me on my work. I've already said all the bad things to myself about myself before you have had the chance to. Which, again, how many of us have done that? It absolutely, let's talk about work for a second. It absolutely impacts work and leadership. People who have imposter syndrome are more likely to be burnt out, and they are less likely to be satisfied with their job, which makes sense. And some of this is systemic, right? You could also be a very confident, self-assured person and walk into a job or a relationship where you are then treated like somebody who is not capable, confident, and all of a sudden it starts to erode at all of that self-trust that you've built. So it makes sense to me. And it could be internal and external, or both, that starts to erode at your internal self-assurance. Now, with leaders who have imposter syndrome, they are likely to have more blind spots, which again makes sense because it does impact the team. You're going to have leaders who either are self-deprecating or overcompensating, and you're going to start to see that it absolutely impacts their leadership style and how efficient and effective the team is. And then finally, on this nerdy side, we do see that it shows up the most in 2 settings in particular. If I were to ask you, good party trick, good party starter, right? For those of you fellow nerds, asking somebody this and seeing what they answer. What 2 settings does imposter syndrome show up in the most or at the highest rates? I'll give you, write it down. I'm like Alex Trebek. Academia and medicine. If you have answered those 2 things, ding, 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 you are our winners. And what's really interesting to me is I have an in-house consulting contract with Brown Surgical over at Brown Health, and I work with the general surgery department and many of the other departments around. And it is incredibly rampant, imposter syndrome. But only very recently have we been starting to say these things out loud, because God forbid I talk about imposter syndrome, then everybody else will know that I feel like a fraud, and I can't have that. So it's also been under lock and key, I feel like, my words, for so long, that imposter syndrome, we are just starting to discuss it in some of these very guarded arenas and areas. Now, you might be like, Daryl, okay, fantastic. Thank you. Thank you for the history lesson. What is it? What is imposter syndrome really? Here are some of the characteristics of it. Fear that you won't live up to expectations, either your expectations or people around you's expectations. Maybe it's your mom, maybe it's your boss, maybe it's your kids, right? Whoever. Overachieving, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but it is when you never have satisfaction from that achievement. Caveat. Sabotaging your own success. We could have a whole podcast about that, but let's just leave it there. Self-doubt, inability to realistically assess your competence and skills. So if I asked you, how do you think you did? You would always self-deprecate, or you would always find yourself speaking about yourself negatively rather than being able to actually see the scope of work and comment on it in its entirety and your part in that. And finally, attributing success to external factors. God, your boss, your team, the wind, the sun, the moon, right? Anything other than you. Because a lot of times we were taught that, especially as women, be humble, like have humility. I don't think being confident means like, I did all this and F my team, like I was the winner here, go me. I think it's about that healthy balance of, I absolutely worked really hard in this. I see my part, and these are the people who supported me in that. Now, imposter syndrome, what does it sound like? It sounds a little bit like everybody else seems to have a plan but me, or I'm not sure I'm qualified for that job, so I won't go for it. Or I don't want to speak up. I don't want to be wrong, so I'm not going to say anything in these meetings, even though like what they're saying is wild right now. Or I'm really good at my job, but I can never be anybody's boss, right? And those are just a few small snippets of what imposter syndrome could look like. What I want to do right now, I'm going to take from a recent keynote that I gave at a bank talking about imposter syndrome, and I want to talk about imposter defenses in the wild. Now, there are five different defenses of how imposter syndrome shows up. I'm going to read through them. I want you to get your mental checklist, your literal notebook out, and I want you to think about how you potentially may fall into these categories, or how the people around you might fall into these categories. Again, they are very broad and they're not meant to be limiting. It's just meant to give you an understanding of where people are and how they might show up, and how to help them out of it, how to recognize it in yourself and in others, and how to help them move forward from it. So the first one is the perfectionist, which seems pretty self-explanatory. And they have this belief that anything less than the best means that I'm a fraud, right? Like I have to be on top of everything at all times. And their behavior is sometimes obsessive. It's obsessive over the details. They set impossibly high standards. So that self-sabotage, perfectionists are the biggest self-saboteurs, hands down. And I say that with love because sometimes I am one. Sometimes the best podcast is a done podcast, right? Sometimes the best brief or document is a done one. Sometimes the best child's party is one that got finished and you had cake, right? Like that's the way to combat that, because their trap as perfectionists are, I dismiss success because it's never good enough. And that's something we talk about a lot of. How you feel about success shouldn't be the measure of success. And obviously what happens from that of this type is burnout, constant dissatisfaction, inability to celebrate wins. And a lot of times it shows up in their interpersonal relationships. Other people feel it as well, where I'm not good enough for you either, right? Like that perfectionist. The next one is the superhero. So if you guys have felt that you have perfectionist vibes, make a star, write it down, do whatever you need to. The next is the superhero. This type, this imposter in the wild, has this belief that they must excel in every role. They take on more than they need to and they take on more than they need to in the sense of like work, partnering, parenting, relationships. Their belief is I have to be good at all of these things, or I am good at none of them. And their behavior really shows up as working longer, working harder, taking on more. And it's really to prove to others their worth. It's almost that people-pleasing person or friend who goes above and beyond, and they're exhausted and they shouldn't, but they just want to do it so other people can validate that they're doing a good job, right? And again, in small doses, there's nothing wrong with that. But when it becomes how you need self-assurance and confidence, that external piece, it erodes very quickly, because the trap is any mistake you have or any limit you have in one role is going to feel like a total failure, again, in all of those roles. And the impact is chronic stress, chronic overcommitment, and a lot of times very blurred lines. These people potentially get themselves into very sticky spots because they're trying to be all things to all people. And sometimes you need to just stay in a lane. The next one is called the expert. And this is our quintessential person who just hoards data. They just won't make a decision because they almost have this belief that if I don't know everything, I'm going to be exposed as incompetent. So they will hoard certifications or go on a million different trainings, and they will need tons of information before acting because they never feel ready enough to step forward. And really, knowledge at that point is a hindrance because they have analysis paralysis and they never actually feel ready, but they feel like they are doing something and they are trapped in that I'm doing, so it must be meaningful or it must be right. And again, they undervalue a lot of times the lived experience, and they do have lots of regrets at times of missed opportunities. Now, the natural genius is our second to last one. And this is the human being that is just good at everything. And their belief is that if I were truly smart or talented, this thing should come easy. And they expect mastery on the first try. And they have intense frustration or shame when effort is required. They just should get it right away. They shouldn't take that long. A lot of times I see this with parents, people who are very good at work try to go into parenting and they're like, why is this so hard? Because you've never done it before, because it's a completely different skill set, and because it's hard. So a lot of times people with this natural genius tendency tend to feel like imposters, maybe not at work as much, but sometimes at home or vice versa. The trap here is struggles or failures because they feel that anytime they fail, it is just proof of inadequacy, and that is just not acceptable to them. And the impact is they might avoid challenges, especially ones that require persistence, and it can ultimately stunt their growth because they stay within a comfort zone. Finally, what we have here is the soloist, our final imposter in the wild. Again, I hope you're kind of taking notes about people on your team and where they might be falling, or even in your household or how you show up. And again, it's not to shame them or put them in a box. It's to recognize these defenses so that we can hopefully diffuse them and create a better environment for everybody to feel supported, or at least give them the runway to do their own work on their own imposter syndrome to make sure that they can move forward from it. So, last one, soloist. This is somebody that feels like asking for help makes them, or just proves to everybody else, that they're a fraud. This is somebody who obviously refuses support, avoids a collaboration, insists on doing everything alone. And the trap here is that isolated success is the only acceptable proof of competence. So if they do something with a team, they are not going to feel like they themselves have achieved anything because they had help or they were a part of something bigger than just them. And the impact here is really, it's disconnection, it's inefficiency, and it's really difficult for these people to sometimes scale into leadership roles because in a leadership position, you have to delegate. You have to rely on your team. Like, that's the whole part or the whole point. Now, you might be like, okay, Daryl, well, what do you do? I have many things that you can do. But the first thing, and I've said this before in many different other capacities, but I'll say it again because it's great advice. Great advice. If you are struggling with imposter syndrome at work, at home, in your relationship, whatever, you don't need to do more. You do need to do less, and you need to do less better, meaning you need to find where the pain points are, and you need to figure out what alignment means to you. And alignment is really harmony between what you value and your choices. And when you can do that, when you stop doing more and you focus on doing less better, that's really the first step. And it takes us into a whole bunch of other dimensions that I won't get into right now for the sake of time, because again, your target run is probably coming to a close. But I will give you some other things that I have found helpful and things that I've helped clients with a ton with imposter syndrome. First thing is, like, dive into your own self-awareness. Get yourself a coach. If you can't get a coach or you don't have time or energy, do some of these assessments, Clifton Strengths, color theory, Myers-Briggs, like, figure out who you are and what the words are surrounding your quote typology, right? That I think it's a little pop psychology-y, but there's so much value in that. I personally love Clifton Strengths because I use it with all my executives, I use it with all my teams and team building. And when I create these leadership dossiers and team dossiers, I take in a whole host of assessments and interviews of the individuals and the team, and I put together everything so I can hand people a document to help explain who they are or how they're showing up based in these assessments, based in these qualitative interviews. And sometimes it's so helpful because then you can say like, oh my God, I didn't even notice I do that. Or this doesn't sound like me. I need to refine that because it's showing up as this. So how do I tweak that? Because that's not what I'm trying to convey, right? It's just data. It really, really is. I also like the idea, and I give this advice a lot, of keeping a personal resume and updating it quarterly. Like, what did you work on that was successful? And again, parents at home, same thing. Did your kid go to school with their shoes on? Put it on the list. It's a win. Put it on the list. Were they fed? Maybe it was Cheerios from the ground and half of them were smushed, or it was Halloween candy. Like, put it on the list. Fed, right? Like, for you high performers out there, you're going to hate this because you're like, that's not good enough. That's not right. And that's because we have this really fucked up view of what success is. Success is either epic failure or epic success, and there's nothing in between. But the reality is there are all these different levels and dimensions of success, from minimal to target to epic, and then there's failure. Start to define what success means. I've said this before, I'll say it again. It's like my biggest thing. If I were to go anywhere and anyone was going to pay me any money or not, I would tell them, sit down, define what success means to you. That's a great starting point. I want you to also listen to your body, right? Listen to your body, meaning focus on your visceral responses when you're in a meeting with somebody, when you're tasked with something difficult, when you're getting feedback that's positive or negative. What do you feel? How do you feel it? Where do you feel it? Write it down. And then I want you to go back and I want you to talk to yourself about how that is just a feeling. It is not a fact. I want you to then list all the facts around it. My boss has to give me a review. It's part of the job. Obviously, there are things I'm going to need to get better at. I'm not supposed to be good at everything. That's not the point, right? Saying those things in noticing when the feeling comes up and saying factual statements back is a very good way to combat imposter syndrome. And finally, I want you to talk about it. I want you to talk about imposter syndrome. I want you to bring it up. If you're a leader at work or in your community or in your mom group or friend group, I want you to talk about the times when you don't feel adequate. And that's a really scary and vulnerable thing to do. And obviously, there's a time and a place to do it. But talking about imposter syndrome and realizing so many people feel it is going to be one of the key things that you can do to realize it is not just a me thing. We are going to feel a little scared when we come up against something new or something important to us or something that matters potentially. All of that is okay. What's not okay is feeling like you can't or feeling like you shouldn't because of your feelings around your own abilities or limitations. That to me is a problem. I don't want you to stop feeling things. I want you to recognize when a feeling is just a feeling and move forward with facts from it. That's what I will say. And that's the advice I'm going to give you. I know today was a little bit more of a coaching session than it was a podcast episode. But this is something, again, that people ask me about all the time. I mean, I have 3 more keynotes lined up on imposter syndrome with women's groups, international finance groups, and a legal group, another international legal group, because people are feeling it at such a rate. And yes, it sounds like a buzzword, but it is impacting individuals and teams and our personal lives. And I think like we need some relief from it. So keep in mind, you're not alone. Keep in check when you're feeling like a fraud and know that you have something you can do about it. Just because you feel it doesn't mean that that is actually what's happening. And that's really where the beauty and the magic begin. I'll leave you with that. I'm hoping that our 20 minutes together was a productive one today, friends. Don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, all of that stuff for this new season. I'm hoping to put out more content for us on things like this and things not like this. So, as always, reach out to me if you have topics you want to discuss or you have a great guest that you want to promote. I am here for it. And as always, thank you for tuning in and listening. I know we don't have a lot of time, and the fact that you just spent 20 minutes with me means everything and then some. I'll catch you with the next F word very soon.